Dr. V.M. Subramaniam, today's chief guest speaker, Professor C. Shunmugom, former professor and head the Department of Linguistics, Bharat University, and my dear colleagues, Dr. Sundara Balu, senior faculty member, Dr. Ramesh, Dr. Shankar Ganesh, students and friends. I welcome you all to the second day of the orientation for the freshers. Before we get into this session, I would like to introduce, as our head of the department said, I would like to introduce our professor, C. Shunmugom. It is an honor for me. Professor C. Shunmugom, former professor and head Department of Linguistics, had his master degrees from Annamalai University and PhD from Pune University. He has served as a lecturer in Institute of Kannada Studies, University of Mysore. Then later he joined Bharat University. Professor Sri Shunmugom is a renowned linguist of our country. He is a legend in linguistics. His contributions are especially in semantics, in addition to stylistics, comparative literature, ethnolinguistics, French grammar, electronic dictionaries, and many more. You can name it. And more than 30 plus students have done their research under his guidance. We can perceive his intellectual contribution through his books, numerous research papers also. Some of the marked works, Miel, that is semantics in Tamil, language awareness, and the language style of Bharatidasan, and many more. He's a creative writer and a trainer of teachers of various levels in modern methods and techniques. Professor have been a member of various committees related to the UGC, UPSC, etc. And he's been working towards development of language linguistics in different countries such as Canada, Singapore, Malaysia, and many more other countries. And with some central and state institutions too. And this is a short introduction about our professor. Now, I would like to leave the platform for our professor. So thank you very much for being with us. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. And I welcome you all for this session. First of all, I have to thank the Vice Chancellor of our University and the administration and the Department of Linguistics, particularly the dynamic head of the department, Professor V.M. Subramaniam, and the brilliant professors Sundara Banu, Ramesh, Vijayan, and Shankar Ganesh for their effort, for their interest in developing and keeping the name and fame of this department, which was started in 1985 and founded by Professor K. Karnataka. I'm also happy that there are many students who have recently joined the linguistic community, and definitely they will have a wonderful life here. Best hostel, there is no hostel facility now available, but you will have a wonderful interaction with all the experts and scholars. You can have also some kind of training in computer aspects. So I welcome the newcomers, and also if the second year students are there, I will also welcome them. And I take this opportunity as a wonderful golden opportunity to interact with the members here. Since you are new, the students are new to this field, because I have seen nearly 15 or nearly 20 students are now participating. They have registered for this graduate program. And I find that all of them are coming from various other disciplines. So I would like to make a very superficial type of introduction without going into the details, so that you will have some kind of interest to create. Okay. Yesterday's lecture also was a nice one, and he has introduced all the various branches of linguistics. And today I will restrict myself. First, I would like to say why we have to study language. Many people will be interested in knowing, and many people will be interested in mastering the language. Mastering of the language and the study of language becomes an important factor because of many factors. Language is actually made up of, first one, let me say, language is made up of rules. Very complicated rules are there in the language, and there is an inquisitive behavior, or they want to know what type of rules are there, how complicated the rules are in a language. So the rules, since they are complicated and they are hard to learn, there is some kind of interest created in the study of language and the mastery of language. To take a simple example, in English, if you want to make an affirmative sentence into an interrogative sentence, the auxiliary verb will have to be preposed. For example, John is here is an affirmative sentence. If you want to convert this into an interrogative sentence, you have to push the auxiliary verb to the front. So you will get is John here. So there is a simple rule that the auxiliary verb has to be preposed. That is, it should be pushed back to the subject position. Now take another sentence, John walks. When you want to make this into an interrogative sentence, walks will not be preposed. You have to create a do auxiliary verb and add the markers, that is agreement markers, and you have to construct as does John walk. Now, though the interrogative formation is a simple one, the rules appear to be complicated. In one case, you have to prepose the auxiliary. In another case, you have to introduce a do auxiliary, then convert this with the agreement markers and then push it. So, John is there. Question is John there? John walks. The question is, does John walk? So this type of rule complication is there in every language, and the people will have that inquisitive mind to know the rules of the language. A second reason why people study language is to appreciate its regularity. Language is simultaneously regular in some areas and irregular in certain other areas. For example, if you want to take the regularity aspect, you take the morphological construction or a word, a negative word. For example, when you say possible, it's a affirmative form. If you want to say it as a negative one, you have to say impossible. So you add an im there as a prefix. Now, according to the beginning or the vowel beginning of the words or the roots, the affixes will vary. For example, in the case of possible, you have to say impossible. Polite, impolite. In the case of decent, you will have to say indecent. Effect, you have to say ineffective. In the case of regular, you have to say irregular. In the case of legal, you have to say illegal. So you will find regularity. Whatever may be the first consonant that occurs in the root word, the same consonant will be repeated in the prefix that you are adding. So you will have in, im, ir, il, etc. will be the prefixes available. So there is some kind of regularity in this thing. So people are armed by this regularity in the language, and they want to know how the language is regular and how the language is irregular in certain aspects. This regularity and irregularity conception came even from the Greek days. There were certain controversies, some kind of questions were asked whether language is natural or artificial, or natural or conventional. Natural means it may be God-given. God-given means it should be perfectly in regular form. But the people who argued that language is conventional, they wanted to say that it is not created by God, it is created by human beings, by culture, by a society, and that is why language is irregular. And this actually led to what we know as the study of words and the history of words, what we call as etymological studies. So language is considered to be regular in certain aspects and irregular in certain aspects, and thereby the language becomes a complex phenomenon, complex aspect. So they want to know the regularity. The third one, if you have mastery over the language, you will be able to correct the grammatical mistakes and other types of mistakes committed by others. And obviously, whenever you are you are correcting the mistake of others, you will have some kind of supremacy over others. You will find that you are dominating others. I have one illustrative situation. When once we had a meeting with the Vice Chancellor, and there was a situation where every month you have to give a report to the Vice Chancellor and every department head. One of the heads, he has written a report and it has to be read. And the Vice Chancellor was actually listening, and the professor told that he congratulates the Vice Chancellor. The Vice Chancellor immediately pointed out that, Professor, you can congratulate me not with a D, but with a T. That is, he had misspelled the word congratulate with D in the middle, not a T. So there, you find a type of situation where the professor was actually not in a position to say anything. So sometimes you have the capacity to know, you have the mastery over the language, and obviously you will be able to appreciate the writings and sometimes find mistakes, whether it is spelling mistake or grammar mistake, etc. So you become dominant. And I have also come across some people, there was a professor who always used to say, let us should read, let us should know. But this type of construction is a wrong one, because you have to say, let us do, let us say, let us write, etc. So should not come, but somehow from the early, it is a kind of fossilized type of error. Sometimes we also, when we learn foreign languages, sometimes we commit certain mistakes and continue to do that, and that becomes a fossil. So correcting mistake is one of the basis, one of the reasons why people want to have mastery over the language. Sometimes you become more powerful if you are capable of handling the language in a better way, in a grammatical way, in an acceptable way, in an aesthetic way. And that is why you find in some countries, in most of the countries, a person who has the verbal ability, a person who has better command over the language, he is considered to be a leader. In Greek times, from the Greek times onwards, we find that those who are versatile in rhetorical technology and rhetorical techniques, they were considered to be good orators. Not only orators, they were the members in the court of kings, they were considered to be the ministers, and even today, you will find in those who are better in oratory, they are considered to be the leaders, whether it is in a democratic setup or in another setups like a community setup, etc. So a man becomes more powerful if he has mastery over the language, and if he has the oratorical techniques. Okay. And another reason for learning the language is learning a language is a challenge, because you will find certain rules are regular in the language and certain rules are irregular. And there is some kind of confusion, and it makes the learner commit mistakes. For example, you take the plural markers in English. In the case of cat, if you have a plural, it is pronounced as yes, cats. If the word is dog, which ends with the voiced consonant, then it becomes a dogs. The Z sound is there. And words which end with X, KS, the plural form is ES. You have box, boxes. In the case of ox, you have a plural marker N, oxen, oxen. In the case of child, you have a plural marker child, children. In the case of fish, there is no plural marker. You have to simply say fish for plural. So there is some kind of regularity. Yes, IZ, Z, etc. They are regular, but there are certain irregular formations. So this type of irregular formations actually pose certain problems for the people, and obviously it becomes a challenge. And because of this irregularity, people commit mistakes. For example, I used to hear sometimes people used to say child instead of saying children, they say childs. So this type of irregularity creates a problem. So learning the language is considered to be a challenge. And another reason for learning the language, if you have mastery over the language, you will be able to comprehend other subjects. For example, suppose you are studying science or your art subjects. If you have mastery over the language, that is, you are capable of comprehending the language in which the scientific things are written, at least you will have some capacity to understand and comprehend. Even though you are not in a position to comprehend fully, you will be in a position to comprehend to a certain extent if you have the comprehension capacity, the understanding and production capacity in the language. So other language subjects can be understood, other concepts can be easily comprehended because of the mastery over the language. And another aspect which is very often presented, you will have the holistic outlook on it. If you have a capacity to understand the language, to produce the language, either in an aesthetic way or in a non-aesthetic way, compositional ability, productive ability, conversational ability, etc., you will have a holistic perspective. You can look at things from not from partial point of view, but from the holistic point of view. And last is you can evaluate others and assess others. If you have the knowledge about the language, some kind of perfect knowledge about the grammaticality of the language and contextual ability, that is appropriateness and acceptability, grammaticality of aspects of the language. If you have the mastery over that, you'll be able to evaluate others and assess others. Some people will be very nice in their behavior, but when they make use of the language, immediately you come across situations where the language is not up to the mark, and obviously your evaluation will vary. So these are some of the aspects why you study the language. Okay, now the second point I would like to discuss is what is language. I give you, because you are a newcomer, I give a small definition. We normally begin with this definition. Language is a system. Language is a system of vocal symbols. Language is a system of vocal symbols by means of which human beings communicate. Now, if we elaborate this thing, language is a system. Now, system normally means a set of units with a definite type of function. If you take the human beings, human physiology, you'll find different types of systems we identify. For example, you have a blood system, circulatory system, you have respiratory system, you have nervous system, etc. So, if you take respiratory system, what is the function of the respiratory system? You have to take in the air and send out the air, take in the oxygen oxygen sent out the carbon dioxide, and the different type of articulators are involved. That is, there are different type of organs which actually do this or involved in this business. You have nose, you have mouth, you have a respiratory tract, you have lungs, and you have that abdomen. Then pressure is there. Then you're doing some kind of action, that some process is going on. So you say a system is one which is made up of several organs, and they in unison they will be undergoing some process, they carry out some process, and thereby the function is taking place. Now, when you talk about the language as a system, you talk about the three types of systems. For example, you have a phonological system, a system which is made up of sounds. You have a grammatical system, which is made up of words, morphology or morphemes, then grammatical categories, etc. That system is there. Then you have a semantic system. That is the system operating with meaning. Now, lexical items are supposed to be items, the basic items which are carrying meaning. Even though morpheme is considered to be the meaningful item, it is a minimal one. We normally, the traditional grammarians as well as modern grammarians, they give importance to these three aspects, phonological aspects. And if the language is a written language, we also talk about graphological aspect of the language. So when you take the phonological system, you will find different types of sounds are being used. For example, we have vowels and consonants. And if you look at the vowels in the names of vowels and consonants in different Indian languages, some of them will make use of the words swara and vyanjan. Swara means something like voicing, and vyanjan means not voiced one. If you take the Tamil situation, you will find these vowels and consonants are classified as Uyir and Mei. Uyir means breath, or you can say life. Mei means body. Now, that type of classification is based on the biology, and they say the body is considered to be one which cannot work independently. Unless there is life in the body cannot work. So, likewise, in language, you will find the vowel weir, life, is considered to be a living type of sound. The other one is a dead type of sound. It requires the vowel to function. And even if you want to pronounce the consonants alone, for example, K, you are pronouncing that K with A only in English, K. Or if you want to say P, you have to add one I, that E sound. And so a consonant cannot function independently. It requires a vowel in order to manifest itself. So they make a distinction, vowel and consonant. And sometimes they also talk about co-articulation and other type of processes involved in the phonological system. So in Tamil, for example, this mei, or what we call as the consonant, is further classified as vallinam, mellinam, and idayanam. Why this is called as vallinam? Because the breath, the stream, the breath is actually stopped in different places. There are certain type of stoppage of these air stream, and there is a hurdle. And the hurdle is dissolved, the hurdle is overcome, and the sound is produced. So that is why it is called as hard sounds. The nga, nya, na, all these nasals are considered to be soft sounds. And ya, ra, la, y, ra, r, la, etc. They are considered as middle type of sounds. They are neither hard sounds nor soft sounds, but in the middle. And sometimes the Tamil scholars used to equate this thing, that this vallinam or the hard sounds are like nails, And the soft sounds or nasal sounds are like females. And the other one, they are in between. No, neither, you can say either hard sounds or soft sounds. So in that way, they made a classification. Now this Tamil classification appears to be somewhat like based on biological or physiological factors, and some kind of religious connotations are also there. Okay. Now take the grammatical system. The grammatical system, for example, you have different types of systems. All these things you are going to study under morphology and syntax, etc. But for the time being, let us imagine that you will have a gender system in the language. You have a number system. Sometimes the languages, the languages, like most of the languages, will have singular and plural type of distinction. You take for example, boy, the word, then boys will be there. And you take the pronoun, you have I, the plural is we. So in that way, singular and plural systems are there. That is number system. You have gender system also. For example, many of the languages will have, some of the languages will have masculine, feminine in a human. And for neuter, there is another category. So you have masculine, feminine gender, neuter gender. But in Hindi, languages like Hindi, you will have a two-way system. You have a masculine and a feminine. So in that way, the gender classification will differ from language to language. Then you have person system. That is, in almost all the languages, you have first person, second person, third person, etc. First person, you have I. Second person, you. Third person, he, she, it, they, etc. So you'll have a person, number, gender system is available. And all the words you take, they will belong to a particular grammatical category. One, you have noun, you have verbs, you have adjectives, you have adverbs, and the minute classifications are there and all that. So a noun, now to make the distinction, since we say a system has to be defined in a particular way, in a scientific way, we say a noun is one which will take the case markers. It will be inflected for case. And a verb is one which takes the tense markers. That is, the verb is associated with time, and noun is associated with a different type of roles. That is why we talk about the roles. For example, you have objective case. When a noun, if you take tree, you can have add prepositions in order to represent the different roles the noun plays in a sentence or noun plays with the verb. So every grammatical category, you have noun, verb, adjective, etc. From the traditional Greek grammarians description, we find the 8 type of grammatical categories: noun, verb, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, interjection, and all those things. Okay. So you have different types of grammatical systems in the language. Now, if you take the semantic system also, within that you will find number system, numbers. For example, you take the numeral form system, and there are 2 types of numerals, for example. You have for example, the word, we take English, for example. If we take 1 as a system, 1, 2, 3, etc., they belong to a particular system. And you have once, twice, thrice. Up to 3, you can have thrice. Once, see, twice, thrice. And after that, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, so times you have to add. So that forms another system. Then third one, you can have a system like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. So TH adding system. So that we call as the ordinal type. So you take the numeral itself, you will find normal one. Then you have the ordinal, that is ordinal. The cardinal one, then ordinal. Then you have another system like once, twice, once, twice, thrice, etc. That type. So you will have different type of minute subsystems in any type of system. And when I say semantic system, you have to talk about the kinship terminologies, for example. Why it is called as a semantic system? The system, you have fauna systems, flora systems, human beings, their professional names, addressing terms, different type of semantic system. That is, they have different types of references. For example, animal names all belong to one. Under that, you will have a further classification as vegetarian animals, non-vegetarian animals. That is, you will have carnivorous, herbivorous, and omnivorous, etc. So that type of classification you make on the basis of their semantic aspect. So we have semantic system. So first we have noted that language is a system. System of what? A system of vocal symbols. Now this definition is actually concerned with the spoken language, the vocal system. And developed languages will have written systems also. So you have language is a vocal system. Vocal means by means of articulation, you are producing different sounds, and from the sounds you make words, from words you make sentences or phrases, and from sentences you make discourses or text, etc. So symbols are very essential. And the vocal, they say vocal means it is actually articulated sounds. The sound system is there. Sometimes the symbols may be written symbols, or the symbols we use for as language may be pictorial symbols. Pictorial symbol means a picture actually represents the meaning that is used for communicating. And you may have logographic symbol. One symbol actually stands for one word. For example, we make use of in English or in other languages, we make use of certain symbols. For example, you have a symbol plus, which actually stands for P-L-U-S plus. Okay. Minus, it stands for minus. One word and one symbol stands for that word. And most of the Greek words are considered to be mu, for example. You have a Greek letter mu, means a refractive index, right? In physics, it is being used. So logographic symbols are those which represent a word. There are pictographic symbols. For example, most of the pictographic symbols you'll find that there are relics of that in Chinese. For example, a picture like the horse will be there in the writing, and that will be representing the horse. Okay. So you have logographic symbol, a symbol that stands for words. And you have syllabic symbols like our languages, for example, the Indian languages, ka, cha, ta, etc. They are syllabic symbols. And you have alphabetic symbols, for example, English, alphabets, alpha and beta joined together. So that type of symbols are being used. And these symbols are considered as arbitrary symbols. And then again, there is a problem. Arbitrariness. What do you mean by arbitrariness? Any symbol is one which conveys some meaning. A symbol is one which carries meaning. It has meaning. And Saussure called this as a signify. And the symbol, the form of the word, the form of the symbol we call as the signifier. The meaning is signify. Now this symbol is called as arbitrary. What do you mean by arbitrariness? There is no connection between the form of the symbol and the meaning of the symbol. If there is no connection, you will call this as arbitrary. If there is a connection, you will have to call it as conventional, motivated symbol or non-arbitrary. Okay. There are certain non-arbitrary symbols also. Non-arbitrary in the sense, more or less, the meaning is a code by the word itself. For example, we have a word hawk. You have some people identify that the bird is called as cock because it produces a sound cock, 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 cock. You have a word like crow, the word crow, because it is associated with a bird because it produces a sound crow, 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 crow. So in that way, they try to equate the object referred by the item with the sound. You have several words. For example, a ring, ringing is considered to be an onomatopoeic word, a word which actually echoes the symbol, echoes the meaning. So there are certain words, and even the words produced also, for example, the sounds produced. The cock will produce the sound cock-a-doodle-doo. And you will find some kind of universality in this. For example, in French it is kiki-liki, cock-a-doodle-doo. In Tamil we say kokarako. So in identifying the sounds also, you will find some kind of connection. And thereby they say that these are motivated words or non-conventional words. They are natural words. And most of the words are considered to be arbitrary in nature because there is no connection between the form of the word and the meaning of the word. Most of the words. So there is no connection between the signifier and the significant. This is just like arbitrariness is just like this. For example, you may name a particular person as Vellayan, white man, wheat man, but he may be a dog. Sure. And likewise, you will have different type of words, different types of names given. For example, you have a word in Tamil, for example, Suyambu. Suyambu, Soyam means that which comes naturally. And sometimes you will have peculiar names also. In Tamil situation, you will find very long names. For example, பொய் சொல்லாமையன் பெருமாள் பிள்ளை. பொய் சொல்லாமையன் பெருமாள் பிள்ளை. And people used to call him as Poila Pillai. Poila means tobacco. So Poila Pillai. So likewise, you have different names of places, and automatically they are contracted in contracted form, and you will use them. For example, Sri Rangapatna, Sirangpatna. So likewise, you will have different type of names. The names are arbitrary in nature because the meaning of the word has nothing to do with the object being referred by that particular word. So language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols. Now, why they use the word symbol? Because in the semiology, the study of science, they identify symbols in terms of these three categories of symbols. For example, there are certain symbols which we call as icons. If the meaning and the form of the word, the sign, form of the sign and the meaning of the sign, there is some kind of similarity, then you will call it as icon. Similarity. For example, Indian map, suppose I say India, and the map of India and the India as such, the geographical territory, there is some kind of similarity between these. So if there is a similarity, then that we call as a sign, icon. And in computer, you will find certain icons, actually representing different type of meanings it represents or what it refers to. Then there is something called index. Index is any item which is contiguous to another item and refer to another item which is contiguous. For example, smoke is the index of fire. Smoke, if there is a smoke, then immediately you can understand that somewhere nearby there is fire. So the smoke is contiguous to the fire, and so we will call it as index. And the black clouds is considered to be an index for rain. So there are certain words which are, there are certain signs which are indexical in nature, indexical. The third one is symbol. The symbol is another sign which is neither similar to the meaning. The form is not similar to the meaning. The form is not similar to contiguous to the meaning, neither similar nor contiguous the relationship between the form and the meaning, then you will call it as a symbol. Okay. So language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which human beings communicate. Now, when you say human beings communicate, it is the language is the system for the human beings. There are animals also. Some animals they communicate. For example, the honeybees are in a position to communicate something on the basis of their body posture. They're able to sense the distance in which the honey is available, and they will be able to communicate it through the type of dance on postures, etc. So that type of system is a type of restricted system. It is not an elaborate system or a recursive type of system, not a system with a duality, patterning, etc. So human communication system, human language is different from animal language because of several characteristics, features. And we specifically say that language is meant for human beings, created by human beings. They have some kind of cultural connection with the human beings, etc. So communicate communicate. Communication involves the process of hearing the language, speaking the language, reading the language, writing the language, transaction of, with the language, or interaction with the language. Interaction means something like conversation. Transaction means a person will be delivering some kind of lecture, and that we call as transaction. Interaction means two people agree and they communicate with each other, in a bidirectional way. So in that way, if you look at it, this is a simple definition, but it actually brings out not only what the language is made up of, it talks about the different type of entities which are being used in the language. It also says that it has a function to do. So from this definition, we come to the conclusion that language has a form, language has some kind of symbols, etc. And language is systematic, language has a system, and it is meant for communication, not only for communication. Language is used for several other things, which we call as speech acts, different type of speech acts. For example, in order to curse someone, you use language. In order to praise people, in order to give orders, etc. And sometimes you make use of different type of functions are there for language. For example, you have representational function. Whenever we want to discuss something, we talk about the world. We try to name different objects in the world. We communicate different type of we make use of sentences in order to narrate the situations or to the different type of events are being portrayed through language. So we make use of language to communicate what we have as an idea, what we have as an event. Certain events are perceived by us, conceived by us, and these events are being communicated with the help of language. So language will have the representational function. Means you are converting the world. You are you have conceived the world, and the world is the events of the world will be communicated, given to others or shown to others. So you have representational function of the language. Language is also used for expressing your emotion, expressing your attitudes, your psychological states, and your affection, love, all these things. So language is used for exposing your emotions, attitudes, feelings, etc. So in that respect, language is expressive in nature. Expressive. Sometimes language is used to make the people do certain things. So language is used for language is used for directing the people, making commands, making requests, etc. So it has some kind of orientation towards the hearer. So that type of language we call as the function of the language is called um, directive function. So the language has expressive function, language has representational function, language has directive function, and language has aesthetic function. Aesthetic means whatever message you are trying to convey, you put it in an aesthetic way. For example, in literature, we make use of various types of stylistic techniques in order to make the language a flowery one or make it more interesting and entertaining. So you have rhyme patterns, rhythms, then meter, metric arrangement, you have consonants, assonance, and all these types of metric pattern, etc. So in order to make the language more aesthetic, appreciative, susceptible for appreciation, we make use of the language that we call as the aesthetic. Now, sometimes you will make the language aesthetic on the basis of certain techniques. For example, keeping the concepts, everything in the opposite, or keeping the concepts which are similar, synonymous concepts, etc. we may use. Sometimes we make use of the language in such a way that a bigger concept is taken and slowly you will come to the minute on the deeper concepts, etc. So different types of poetry available on the basis of form, on the basis of meaning, on the basis of style, etc. So whatever you use the language, you use language for aesthetic purpose, then it's called aesthetic function. That we call in Prof linguistics, they used to call it the poetic function of language. Then the another one is static function. Now, sometimes we make use of language just for gossip. You have no other type of communication. No, you don't want to communicate anything, but just to maintain some kind of social relationship. For example, suppose you are going on the road, your cycle has a flat tire, and somebody passing by, he used to ask me, whether the tire is flat. He is asking the question to you. He is asking this question just to show that he is also moved because of the flattened tire, and he tries to show his affection in such a way so that he will also walk along with you. So for that only you use. And sometimes all these types of greetings, etc., are considered to be they're not for communicative, for just maintaining social connection. So gossiping is considered to be one of the important aspects, and that is maintaining for social connection. You get up in the morning, you say good morning. You get up in the and you see first time good morning. Sometimes in the noon, good noon. So all these things are only meant for maintaining the social ties. So that is called as patigomania. And there is another type of function we call as metalinguistic function. Metalinguistic means we make use of the language and create certain symbols, meta-language symbols, in order to represent. In science, you will find such type of meta-language being used. For example, metalinguistic symbols are being used. Metalinguistic symbols mean, for example, you write H2O for water. Water actually refers to something, and that is the word water. And in order to convert this water is represented as H2O. Similarly, you will find, for example, in anthropology, for representing male, you have a symbol. For representing female, you have a symbol. So different type of symbols are being used to represent the words, etc. So metalinguistic function is this. So language has different type of functions. These functions are determined by the communicative situation and the components of communicative situation. You have speaker, hearer, message, code. You have the medium. All these things are taken into account, and the language function is being determined. This is a Jacobsonian classification of the language function. So we find that language is a system. Language has a set of symbols, and the symbols are organized in a particular fashion, and that is meant for communicative purpose. It has a function, it has a structure. So that is about the language. Okay. Then I'll move on to how we use the language. Now, whenever we are talking about, Sasur had made a distinction that language has two forms. Language exists in two forms. One is the mental type of language, a language which is kept in the mind. That language we call as the mental language, or what we call as lang, L-A-N-G-U-E, the French word lang. The language, when it is a system of signs. The signs are organized and the signs are kept, signs means the symbols, they are kept there in the mind. Different types of symbols are kept in the mind. And different type of rules of combining these items also will be kept in the mind, that we call as the social type of language or mental language. The language of found in the mind of the native speaker, in the cognition of the native speakers. So that we call as a language. The other is the manifested form of language. One is the static form of language, the other one is the dynamic form of language. Dynamic form of language is speech. So you have a fund of symbols available, rules are available. By taking these symbols, selecting the symbols, selecting certain rules, of combining them, you will create the speech. So speech is nothing but the manifestation of the mental language. The concept of mental language came to Sassoon on the basis of the sociologist Durkheim. There was one sociologist, Durkheim. He said that every member of a particular community has certain notions, has certain ideas about the society. What you have to do, what you should not do. That he called as the social fact. What do you mean by social fact? The social fact is one which actually makes you to behave in a particular way in a society. You are allowed to do certain things, you are not allowed to do certain other things. And this type of restrictions in the social behavior is kept in your mind, and that we call as the social fact. So there are certain things. For example, you take a simple example. You are not supposed to, in Indian context, if you are eating, normally people used to say that you are not supposed to talk while you are eating. Whereas in the Western setup, you have to talk only in the dining table. So there is a social fact. And similarly, you will have another social fact that you are not supposed to use unparliamentary words in the midst of people outwardly. You should not use four-letter words, you should not use unparliamentary words, etc. So there are certain norms and rules and regulations. For example, if you look at a Tirukkural, all the chapters are concerned with the different type of models of behavior. You should not say lies. You should only take truth, and you should take care of the guests, and you should not. So there are different types of rules and do's and don'ts, and these do's and don'ts adopted by the society we call as social facts, because they are kept in the mind of their speakers, mind of the people who belong to a particular society. Now, for example, in our societies, certain societies, you are not supposed to marry your father's brother's daughter or son, whereas you are allowed to marry the father's sister's daughter or son. So that type of restriction, this is a social kind of rule. Why it is there? No, for the rules we cannot have any of this thing. It may have certain implications, genetic implications, etc. So certain rules are there. This is social fact. That means call this a social fact. And Saussure had taken that idea and he pointed out that every language speaker belonging to a particular culture, particular society, they have certain facts in there about the language. What is grammatical and what is ungrammatical, what you have to say, what you should not say, what you have, what type of rules are allowed, what type of rules are not allowed while you are combining this words, symbols, etc. So that is why he called this as a linguistic fact. And linguistic fact is nothing but the mental language, the cognitive form of language. Whereas the physical language is the speech, you are speaking that language. Okay. So whenever you are using the language, that means whenever you are speaking, you have to follow certain rules and regulations. The basic thing in while speaking is you have to select certain linguistic elements and you have to sequence them. So obviously, whenever you are using the language, the order comes into your mind. So word order is considered to be an important fact. You take any language, for instance, certain orders, certain languages will permit word transposition of words, but certain languages will not permit the transposition of words. So word order is considered to be an important factor. The second is selection of linguistic elements. Certain elements only will go with certain other elements. For example, you take a simple example like he goes every day. Suppose you want to make a question. He goes every day to the market. And if you want to have a tag question, what do you have to do? He goes to the market every day in English. And if you want to make a tag question, you should make the tag question with if the main sentence is positive, the tag form should be negative. For example, he goes every day to the market. The tag question form is doesn't he? He goes to the market. Doesn't he? You have to say. And in the case of he doesn't go to the market every day, you have to have the tag question does he. So this type of, some kind of order, some kind of selection is there. What is the selection? If the main sentence is positive, the tag will be negative. If the main sentence is negative, the tag will be positive. And similarly, you have a relative pronoun usage. For example, the boy who comes, you have to say who. You cannot say which, the boy which comes. So all the neuter things only will have that relative pronoun usage which, whereas the human, you have to use who, the boy who comes. The boy which comes is wrong. Similarly, the cat which lies in the corner, the cat which lies in the corner, the cat who lies in the corner is the wrong one. So selections are there, selection restrictions are there. You take any word, for example, an adjective plus noun, or an adverb plus noun, verb, or you take auxiliary verbs with this thing. So you will have some kind of selection restrictions are being imposed. So order is considered to be, when you are using the language, you have to make use of the order, you have to make use of category selection, you have to have semantic selection. For example, certain selection, for example, you have to say, a lady gave birth to a child. You cannot say the man gave birth to a child. So giving birth is considered to be one which goes only with the man, only with the lady, not with man, etc. So semantic selection is there. Then you have modulations. While you are making speech, you have to have a different type of modulations. For example, you should have tonal variations. You have junctures, and you have stress and pitch patterns, etc. So modulations you have to make. Then modification, there are certain, for example, I am coming, instead of I am coming, you can say I'm coming. Wanted to go, you can convert this in speech as wanna go. Wanted to go. So this type of modification. So whenever you are making sentences, while you are making use of sentences in speech, etc., you have to follow certain regulations with regard to order of elements, selection of elements, modulation of elements, and modification of elements, etc. Using the language is considered to be an important aspect. Now I will rush up to this thing. Now the first point, why we have to study language is one. The second is what is language. I gave you a very small definition. Okay, then I said a very small description of how we use the language in terms of four aspects: order, selection, modification, and modulation. Now, certain activities are very important. Only on the activities people undertake in relation to language, which will lead to different type of disciplines in language study. Now, I will just point out some one or two, just overall way. Activities in relation to, what are the activities in relation to language we undertake? For example, we classify languages. We classify languages. There are two types of classification. You say genealogical classification and typological classification. Genealogical classification means on the basis of birth. It is generally assumed from 19th century historical linguistics that languages multiply. That is, language, the mother language gives birth to daughter languages, etc. So you have language families are being established. So we have different type of families established: Indo-European families, Indo-Aryan families, Dravidian families, Austroasiatic families, Tibeto-Burman. So likewise, different families of language. These languages are related on the basis of genesis, that is birth. So genealogical classification, and all the world languages are classified like that. Then you have typological classification. What type is there? You know, just like human beings, which are classified on the basis of European, on the basis of Negroid culture, then Mongolian, etc., on the basis of their skin color. For example, white skin, black skin, and yellow skin, etc. So types. Similarly, you have classification on the basis of their or their body structure, etc. So different types of classification, types. So typological classification, language can also be classified on the basis of different characteristic behavior they have. On that basis, we classify world languages under three categories. We can say isolated languages. That is, every item, every unit in the language, in a sentence or in a phrase or in a word, you'll find isolated items of it, independent items of it. So such type of languages, we may normally quote the Chinese language for that purpose. That is isolated. Agglutinative language. Glue means you are pasting something. You know, there are certain languages where words contain many items pasted together. Agglutinative, glued together. Agglutinative. Almost all Indian languages will be. There are certain languages, African languages, agglutinative. Synthetic or polysynthetic languages. They are attached, so they are mixed up in such a way that you will not be in a position to identify different type of elements which are being glued together. So we normally say agglutinative language means you will be able to separate them. It's just like a mixture. In a mixture, eatable, the mixture, you will have different components. For example, you have some nuts will be there, then you will have a different type of, karabundi and all those things. You have different elements. You can separate them. If you want to have a separate, you have chips. All these things will be available within the mixture. So that is agglutinative. Whereas polysynthetic languages are those just like a coffee. You have sugar, you have coffee, you have milk, all these things, and you cannot separate them. So it is just like coffee, and the other one is just like a mixture. Okay. So we sometimes create languages, create new languages. For example, due to language contact, different language families, the people from different language families come together. They come into contact with each other because of business, etc. They create. Both of them will be talking, partly English, partly French, and partly the native language. That way they mix. And so we have a language contact situation Because of that, there is a mixed-up type of language being created that we call as pidgin. Pidgin is a word, pidgin language. Pidgin is a mixture language. The word pidgin is actually coming from business. Business is modified as pidgin, business type of language, the language meant for business. Then, when the pidgin language, business language, mixture language becomes the mother tongue for people, it becomes Creole. So you have French Creole, Haitian Creole, different type of Creoles available. These are languages being created because of language contact. We create literature with the help of language. Now, for example, we have different types of literatures. For example, we have folk literatures, written literatures, and different type of games making use of language. For example, we have different type of games, puzzles, and all those things. So we create games, poems, poetry, prose, drama, all those things, folk tales, all these. For example, if you take the folk tales in Tamil, the major two things they say that lullaby, songs of lullaby, and songs for death, lamenting. Okay. Then sometimes while we are making use of language, we face a lot of problems. And problems are also being studied under the language study. For example, while during the language learning process, we produce a lot of errors. The errors may be from spelling errors, it may be pronunciation errors, different type of, and these pronunciation errors, etc., are sometimes occur because of the mother tongue influence or because of the irregularity of the language that you are studying or the inability of the person who is studying. And sometimes it will make you a laughing stock if you are making the errors and the pronunciation mistakes, etc. For example, I had a situation where in the North Indian situation where I was put for some time. And the Tamil language has no distinction between the voiced sounds and voiceless consonants, etc. So I went to the market and I was about to ask for oil. So I asked the vendor, give me 1 kilo dil ka tel. And immediately, no, it's not available, sir. You cannot get anywhere. Then I was wondered why. Then he corrected me, and you want til ka tel. So dil means heart in Hindi, and til means sisame. So because of the mispronunciation, it leads to some kind of problematic situation. There was another situation. The Odia speakers normally will not make a distinction between sa and sha. Just like the Copenhagen, in Copenhagen, they cannot make the distinction between sa and za. Z and sa. They cannot make the distinction. So likewise, similarly, cluster also is a problem. Now coming to the Oriya situation, the people will not be in a position to differentiate. So once I had a meeting, I was in a meeting and a speaker came and all of us stood up and he said, all of you shit. So because of the distinction between sa and sha is not there, people were just laughing and they could not control their laughter. So you have this pronunciation problem, and sometimes you may have the process through which you can avoid that. For example, clusters cannot be pronounced by people, some language people. So they avoid the cluster by adding some vowel in the front or back. In Punjabi, you can say instead of station, you have to say station. And school, some language speakers make use of the word school or is school, etc. So this problem, we face problems in language learning. We also face problem in using the language that is due to some kind of physiological problem. We call it as language disorder. So language disorder, stuttering is a kind of a neurological disorder. You have aphasia, or sometimes remembering the names of the places, etc. So different problem. Sometimes we find that language is not sufficient and we try to enrich the language. For example, if several varieties of language are there and you are not in a position to use which variety, you try to standardize them. That we call a standardization process. And sometimes due to scientific development, we require new technical terminologies, new type of items, etc. So we want to modernize the language. So what you do is you try to create technical vocabulary items, etc. And sometimes in languages, you don't have any kind of script. They try to develop some kind of script that we call as grammarization. And sometimes we try to make simplification because we want to enrich the language, effective communication, etc. If you look at your mobile, you will find you have a lot of contractions. Acronyms are being used. Letter, they write LR, and instead of U, they will write the capital letter U. And you will find if you go to the mobile, you have the what is that? Facebook or Twitter, whatever it may be. Different type of communicative patterns. You will find that all type of acronyms are being used, and sometimes some metaphorical usages are also being used. So we call the simplification. So sometimes we enrich the language by technical term creation and modifying the writing system. If the writing system is not sufficient to capture the different type of sounds which are coming, borrowed sounds, etc., you try to reform the writing system in order to make it simple. Okay, so sometimes you have deficiency in the use of language, and in order to cover up the deficiency, what you do is you try to use the language, but in code mixed form and code shift form. Code mixed form means you are joining two language forms and you are using. Suppose I want to say, I'm not coming in the evening. I'm not coming. I'm not coming Savere or Shanko. I'm not coming Shanko. So you are making a shifting, mixing. So you mix it, English and Hindi you mix. And there is a peculiar situation, for example, in Kupwar, there was a social linguistics study where the Kupwar Kannada, Urdu and Kannada are mixed up in such a way that the syntactic structure will be Kannada sometimes. And the words used will be Urdu. And sometimes the syntactic construction will be Urdu and the lexical items will be in Kannada. So Kupwar Kannada is considered to be a peculiar type of Kannada. Social linguistics study was undertaken there. So we have code mixing and code shifting. Code shifting means even in cinema or films, etc., you will find. I wanted to come, now Varnun Nancha. You say first English, then you convert this into Tamil. So I wanted to come, now Varnun Nancha, but Ana Varla. So you shift this thing. That is because of deficiency in the use of language, or you make up the deficiency by means of shifting and this thing. And sometimes we preserve the language. For example, traditional ways of preserving the language through literature. And you have dictionaries for preserving the lexical items of the language. And you have grammatical description for preserving the grammatical aspects of the language, text, etc. But now you will find different type of methods are being used. Methods as well as mechanical methods. Computer type of preservation is being adopted. Material to preserve them, etc. Use of computer for language activity. For example, for processing the language, you have parsing, generation, processing, etc. For keeping items, converting the manual form into electronic form, you have electronic dictionaries, and you have the corpus creation, this thing, and techniques, and you make use of different teaching packages, call to packages, etc. are available. So we are trying to introduce everything into the computer, and of late we are even computer is for a higher purpose, and we do everything for the normal day-to-day activity. We make use of the mobiles, etc. for all our this thing. And the major part is actually analyzing the language and synthesizing language. So that will be discussed by your morphology teacher, syntax teacher, phonology teacher. So I have presented a bird's eye view, you know, of certain things. 4 points I have mentioned. Everybody will have the enthusiasm to know why you study the language. And there are certain things. If you have some mastery over the language, you will be considered to be a leader. You will be dominating others. You will be in a position to correct the people. So you will have some kind of power. So it is a power relation. Language, if you have mastery, that is even in religion also. For example, if you know some slokas, you are considered to be a good priest. Okay. So power. What is language? So it is a system, it has structure, it is a set of symbols, it's meant for communication and for other functions, etc. How we use the language, and 4 points I mentioned, we use language by means of sequencing them, selecting items, modifying items, modulating the item. Under that, we can talk about several things. And various activities in which we are involved, taking primary focus or giving primary focus on language. And these different type of activities, I mentioned some of them. Okay, I think you have got some idea about linguistics. Okay, I'm happy to stop the lecture here. I'm happy that you have all listened, and thank you for giving this wonderful opportunity to interact with the young faces. Nearly 15-20 faces have entered into the linguistic community, and definitely you will have a better ability, grammatical ability, communicative ability, reading, writing, listening, speaking, interaction, etc. Okay, thank you very much.
Very good afternoon to all present here. Today's sessions, Dr. C. Shunmugom, former head, Department of Linguistics. Oh, Dr. Subramaniam, I thought you were in a meeting. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Please go ahead. I just got it. Please go ahead, Dr. Ramesh. Yeah.
Okay. Let me thank the head of the department for giving me an opportunity to deliver a word of thanks for this session. And once again, I thank Dr. Shunmugom sir for his valuable time. And I think he has totally elaborated the part of language to begin with why study linguistics or language. What is language basically, right from starting from phonetics to morphology, syntax, semantics, etc., and pronunciation, and the vocal system and written systems. He has totally elaborated. I think students, you might have had a real trip into the world of language, how the professor has given you, shared his ideas about sounds representing the object names, wherein next talking about the communication system, human communication system and the animal communication system. And I think he has not even left a single piece of language related items in his today's session. So right from functions of language, how a language should function, and how the language is being structured to the symbol system and how it has been activated, etc. And even the pronunciation part, finally he was giving an idea how the mother tongue influences in the second language, where he was giving an example from the Oriental language context. So like which, such an interesting session it was, sir. Thank you once again, sir, for your valuable time, and hope our students would have had a real good time. And I think it is an eye-opener for you students to enter into the world of language and linguistics. Hopefully you will get along with this and enjoy your studies and your career. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.